Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. Now we're going to take a look at Scotland's private rent sector here in this video, specifically the massive increase in rents that's been declared. But this is not all as it seems to be. Scotland has, for the last sort of 4 years or so, had some of the most draconian rent controls anywhere in the United Kingdom. And this has led to the issue we have today with what appears to be a very large rent increase, but actually that is not the case. It is more a rebalancing of what it should be. The government got involved thinking they were doing good, but of course this is the SNP government, very little thinking going on. And they've actually created a problem now of their own making. And that is that there are very large increases in rent. Now, it isn't a problem that's going to go away, but it is a problem that should be driven by market forces and not governmental interruption. If the government thinks that rents are too high, perhaps the government should be building more houses. But alas, that's not what's going on. They are determined, as we know, to destroy the housing market, to destroy the private rental market, and to destroy the short-term rental market. And therefore, they actually want to increase homelessness. It's the only explanation for their policies. But we'll look at this and see why they've got it so very, very wrong. Here goes. So this is a piece in the Herald, and I saw it and I thought, first reading it looks bad, but when you actually look into it and actually think about what's happening, it's not nearly as bad as it appears. And what you actually have is a government policy backfiring massively, but you don't expect anything less. So private rents in Scotland soar by 22% in a year despite the ScotGov rent freeze. And that, of course, has been the problem. The average private sector rent across Scotland has soared by up to 22% in a year, despite the bill curbs brought in by Scottish Government to support people through the cost of living crisis. Also brought in through the COVID crisis as well. The official figures for the year to September 2023, based predominantly on advertised rents, put the average rent for a two-bed property in Scotland at £841. That's up 105 compared with the previous year. Average rents for the two-bedroom property in Scotland, the most common size of property in the private rented sector, rose by 14.1%. Glasgow saw the highest rent increase of any area, both over the past year and over the past 13 years. Although why 13 years? It seems a very arbitrary number. Who knows? The average rent for a two-bedroom property in Glasgow soared by 22% in the year up to September. The average rent for such a house now costs £1,050 a month, up from £858 in 2022 and £564 in 2010. I don't know why they just chose 2010. It seems a very odd number. 13 years? I can understand a 10-year number or whatever. Well, there's a couple of things which we must get into. And they say this represents an 86.2% rise in 13 years. Okay, well, we'll take that number. But there's a couple of things you do need to understand. Firstly, there was several years where you couldn't put the rent up, or you could only put the rent up by 3%. This was during a time of what turned out to be rather high inflation. And so you have to take that into consideration. You also have to take in the fact that that's just general high inflation. When you look at what house inflation has been since around the 2010, since really the recovery after the 2008 bust when the banks went tits, house inflation has been actually immense, way above the headline rate of normal sort of what's measured as inflation. And you take that as a function of rent, and one of the basic rules if you're renting is that the rent per year should be 5% of the value of the house. But another way of looking at it, the way commercially, when I worked for the construction company, we had hundreds of houses and properties that we rented out, and basically we said it was 0.5% of the house value should be the rent each month, and that worked out about the right figure, and that's how we ran it. And if you do that, but then of course what you're happening is obviously the values of the houses increase. Now, if you are, for example, if you are a landlord who owns a house and it's worth for the sake, just to do the numbers nice and easy, if it's worth £100,000 and you were renting it out at £5,000 a year, that's a 5% yield on the value of the house. 5% income on an investment is not greedy. If, for example, though, the house went up to £200,000 in value over a few years, you'd think your rent would have to be £10,000 a month. Sorry, £10,000 a month, £10,000 a year. Now, a lot of people think, oh, you've doubled the rent, but you're still only getting a 5% return on your investment. Now, it may mean you're getting a lot more money, but it's still only a 5% return. Now, if they're artificially saying you can't make that 5% because the rent controls this, rent controls that, then what are you going to do? As a landlord, you'd be better off selling your house and investing that money into the stock market where you're still going to get your 5%. Thank you very much. Only you don't have the hassle of having to deal with tenants, of having your income limited because of some arbitrary number that someone's describing in an office in government. You don't have repair bills. You don't have any other issues. You don't have registrations or anything like that. You just put it in, get your 5% and walk away with the money. The harder you make it for landlords, the fewer landlords there are. And of course, it's a supply and demand curve. When there's fewer properties and there's more people after them, the rents go up. Who benefits? Quo bono. Who is it good for? Nobody. So, as a government, the idea is that you don't screw the landlords over. You make it easy for lots of people to be landlords. You flood the market with rental properties, and that brings the rents down. So who benefits? The tenants. But the trouble is, the Scottish government don't understand that. And so they make it harder and harder and harder for landlords. A lot of them get out of the game, fewer properties, rents go up, and then they moan, oh, the rents are too high. The rents aren't too high. If a landlord puts a house up at an amount of money that he would like, but nobody rents it, he's not making that money, so he has to reduce the rent. He said, okay, well, I'll put it up at £2,000, no one's getting it. I'll put it up at £1,700. Nobody wants it. I'll put it up at £1,600. No one wants it. I'll put it up at £1,500. Someone's bought it at £1,500. That's the level the market can bear. It's not up to the government to say what the price should be. It's a private arrangement between the person renting and the person leasing. It's there. Why the government needs to get involved, nobody knows. Now, if you want to control and say, right, once you go on the market, you have a 3-year limit on rent rises, but after that you can increase to market rate, that's fine. That's an arrangement that you can come in as a private renter. You say, look, bank, this is what I want. And that's fine. You can negotiate. What is wrong with people? It's nothing to do with the government. But having limited increases for so long, and then when a tenancy ends, what are the landlords going to do? Right, I've had someone in there, I couldn't put his rent up for 3 years. Last year I put it up for 3%, even though inflation was running at 10%. So effectively, I have over the last 4 years had a 3% increase in rent when it should have been 22% if you took at the actual inflation rate over the last 4 years. What's he going to do? Go, boom, 22%. He'll put it up to what the market can hold. And that's what you're seeing here. It's not the landlords throwing the rents right up because they're greedy. It's the landlords bringing it back up to where it should be. What do you do? What do you do? It's just basic economy. This is basic law of supply and demand and the law of return on investment. Why would a landlord invest and not make the most out of his investment? Why would anyone invest any money at a rate lower than what they could get elsewhere? If I told you, put your money in this bank and you'll get 0.5% a year, or put it into that bank and you get 10% a year, where are you going to put your money? Why are landlords any different? This is why so many of them are selling their houses, and there's a massive housing problem. It's created exclusively by the SNP government. Anyway, just to round this off, rent increases notices between the 6th of September last year and March the 31st this year were seen as void. So there was no rent increases. This was replaced by a 3% rent cap for private tenancies in April, which was to remain in place until September 23, but it's now extended until March next year. And so basically, if you are currently renting somewhere else, you can't increase the rent. But if that tenant leaves, yes, you can. But come March next year, of course, what they're going to do is, we'll put another extension on, and another extension on, and another extension on. What they're actually trying to do as well, and this is where the madness lies, is that once one tenant leaves, his contract's done and done, you're not allowed to increase the rent for the new tenant. How dare they? The new tenant, you offer him a price and he goes, yes, okay, I'll take it. And that's that. But they want to change that now. And then they're going to wonder, when there's no private landlords left in Scotland, and yet all these people will be on the streets because there's nowhere for them to live, because these people can't afford to buy houses. What are they going to do? They're going to go, oh, damn, if only there was enough private rental properties available. But there aren't. And okay, then we'll build social housing. No, you won't, because none of the builders will be building anything. They won't have the money to pay to build social housing, because social housing, the profit margins on it are tiny. By law, they can only put on, by law, I think it is the profit margin on social housing is something like maximum of 10%. Well, a 10% there isn't gonna cut it in the construction industry. You want margins of 35%. That's how you pay for it. It's how you buy your next chunk of land, is the profit on this one. But again, Marxists in government haven't got a clue. And that is why the problem in Scotland is going to get worse. And there's the man to blame. The man who wants rent freezes. The man who says you don't throw tenants out. This is a man who pays rent. This is a man in a flat who is a tenant. He doesn't want his rent to go up. He doesn't want tenants thrown out. And he also wants to destroy the Scottish house building industry. So when you are sitting there as a tenant in Scotland and wondering why the rents have gone up and why you can't buy a house and why the whole problem is getting far, far worse, who are you going to blame? The Muppets. There he is. You knew it from the moment I began this piece, didn't you? I'm coming up. The weird and yet ironic thing is that most people who vote SNP are the ones most likely to be in rented accommodation. And they're the ones who they think are benefiting from having rent controls and not being able to pay your rent and then not getting thrown out. And they think it's going to work that way. But these are the ones that will find themselves in deep, deep trouble when there is nowhere to rent. And where all the landlords are screwing up and leaving, the ones that remain will have rents that are going up so fast at the end of the tenancies that there is nothing they can do. And they'll be going, oh, but the SNP said it was going to be so much better if we keep voting for them. It's never going to get better when you keep voting for the SNP. You've got to accept if you vote for the SNP, you're really stupid, right? And so just accept that you're stupid and think that your decisions aren't going to be wise decisions. And just remember that the SNP are for people like you. They're made of people like you. And if you know how stupid you are, then you must be able to understand how stupid they are. And you're trusting your future to them. Wow, that really is stupid. I'll stop there. Thank you very much for watching. And if you are considering going into rented accommodation, do make sure you get a long-term agreement. I've been in the game for years. As I say, I worked for a house builder who rented out several houses on every site they built. And they had hundreds upon hundreds and hundreds of houses. We were very good. We were very good. And we always maintained them and all that. We were up there. We were a big renter. But we always allowed people to do long-term deals. And I encourage landlords to do it as well, because it means you get security of tenants, which is always a good thing. And the tenants get security of tenancy, which is always a good thing. So that's from me. That's my little piece of advice. But it's just going to get worse while the SNP are there. You've got to say, when you have morons running housing policy, what do you expect? Till next time, stay safe, stay well, and I will speak to you later. Bye.